In the 1960s, Bob Crane was living every entertainer's dream. A perfect smile, razor-sharp timing, and a natural charm that made him one of the most likable men in show business. Audiences adored him as Colonel Hogan on Hogan's Heroes, a risky sitcom about prisoners of war that, against all odds, became a cultural phenomenon. But Crane wasn't just a TV star. Before Hogan's Heroes, he was already famous in Los Angeles radio, the man of 1,000 voices, hosting a hit morning show packed with celebrity interviews, comedy bits, and even live drumming. His wit was so fast that Walt Disney himself once called him the fastest in the West. By the mid-60s, Bob Crane had it all. 2 Emmy nominations, millions of fans, his face on lunchboxes, billboards, and magazine covers. To the outside world, he was unstoppable. But behind the smile, something darker was taking shape. Friends noticed subtle changes, strained relationships, a constant search for new thrills. Crane was still making America laugh on camera, but off camera, he was living a double life, a life he thought he could keep secret forever. It began as a hobby, photography. But Crane wasn't interested in landscapes or portraits. He was filming his private encounters with women. Some knew, many didn't. And soon the camera wasn't just a hobby, it became an obsession. Then came John Carpenter, a video equipment salesman with connections in Hollywood. Carpenter didn't just provide gadgets. He set up hotel rooms. He helped arrange encounters. And together, he and Crane filmed everything. To acquaintances, they looked like 2 carefree bachelors, but others were disturbed. Crane's charisma was covering up something compulsive, even dangerous. As the obsession grew, his life unraveled. His marriage collapsed. His career stumbled. Co-stars saw a man distracted, erratic, consumed by recording his secret world. And then in 1978, the secret exploded. On June 29th, Bob Crane was found bludgeoned to death in his Scottsdale, Arizona apartment. No forced entry, no robbery, nothing stolen, just a brutal personal attack and an electrical cord tied loosely around his neck. The crime scene was chillingly tidy, except for one thing. Dozens of cameras, tapes, and tripods documenting Crane's private life in disturbing detail. Whoever killed him, knew his habits, maybe even knew his secrets. The last person to see him alive? John Carpenter. They had dinner together the night before. They even watched their tapes. Hours later, Bob Crane was dead. Carpenter became the prime suspect. He had access. He had motive. And Crane had allegedly tried to end their friendship just days before. But without fingerprints, without the murder weapon, and with only faint traces of evidence in Carpenter's rental car, the case stalled. The tapes were boxed away. The trail went cold. And one of Hollywood's most shocking murders remained unsolved. For years, Bob Crane's murder sat in the cold case files, just another unsolved Hollywood tragedy. But when investigators took a second look at his friend John Carpenter, and at one small detail in a rental car, everything changed. Carpenter wasn't some stranger in the shadows. He was Bob Crane's closest companion. They traveled together, filmed together, lived out a secret double life that few in Hollywood ever knew about. But by 1978, that bond was breaking. Crane had remarried. He was trying to change, to settle down, to escape the obsession that had consumed him. And Carpenter, he wasn't ready to let go. Friends later said Crane told Carpenter their friendship was over. That revelation would haunt everything that came next. Because when investigators retraced Carpenter's trip to Scottsdale, the timeline started to unravel. He admitted having dinner with Crane the night before the murder. They even watched tapes together, but Carpenter claimed he left early. Witnesses, however, remembered seeing him return to his motel much later than he admitted. Then came the rental car. On the passenger door, a faint smear. Inside, small tissue fragments. Not much, but enough to raise alarms. Carpenter couldn't explain it. But in 1978, science couldn't prove it either. DNA testing didn't exist. With no weapon, no fingerprints, and no way to link those fragments to Bob Crane, prosecutors had nothing. Carpenter walked free. He denied everything, gave interviews, and painted himself as the victim of a media circus. But in the court of public opinion, he was already guilty. His name was forever tied to Bob Crane's death. Years passed. Hollywood moved on. But in Scottsdale, detectives didn't forget. By the early 1990s, forensic science had caught up, and they finally had the tools to test the fragments from Carpenter's rental car. The results weren't perfect. The DNA was degraded, but it pointed strongly toward Bob Crane. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was enough. In 1994, John Carpenter was arrested and charged with Bob Crane's murder. The entertainment world exploded. After years of silence, Carpenter was dragged back into the spotlight. Reporters swarmed his home. His face filled tabloids. And inside the courtroom, the trial unfolded like a made-for-TV drama. The prosecution leaned on motive: jealousy, rejection, desperation. They claimed Carpenter snapped when Crane tried to cut him off, but the defense attacked the evidence. Too weak, too contaminated, too speculative. And then came the bombshell. In trying to show motive, prosecutors exposed Crane's darkest secrets: the tapes, the compulsions, the double life. Suddenly, the trial wasn't just about John Carpenter. It was about Bob Crane himself, and the jury was forced to wade through a web of obsession, betrayal, and addiction. In 1995, after weeks of testimony, the verdict came in. John Carpenter was acquitted. He walked free, and Bob Crane's murder was once again unsolved. But for Crane's son, Robert Jr., this wasn't the end. He had grown up watching his father make America laugh, only to watch his image collapse into scandal and tragedy. The trial didn't give him closure. It gave him more questions. So Robert Jr. started digging through old files, through police reports, through the people who had known his father best. And what he found was disturbing. Sloppy evidence, missed timelines, details investigators had either overlooked or ignored. And more than anything, Robert Crane Jr. was haunted by one man: John Carpenter, the man who once called his father his best friend. To Robert, Carpenter was not just a suspect. He was the last link in a chain of lies, secrecy, and betrayal that had stolen everything from their family. Robert never softened his words. In interview after interview, he was direct. He believed Carpenter was guilty. He believed the jury got it wrong. And he believed the justice system had failed his father completely. But Robert's mission was never just about pointing a finger. It was about taking back his father's story, the story of who Bob Crane really was. In 2015, he released a memoir titled Crane, Sex, Celebrity, and My Father's Unsolved Murder. Inside, he didn't just revisit the crime. He peeled back the mask to reveal the complicated man behind the ever-present smile. A man who could make a room light up with charm and humor, but who privately wrestled with demons few ever saw. Robert spoke with brutal honesty. He didn't shy away from his father's addictions or his compulsions. He didn't try to rewrite history, but what he did offer was something that had been missing from every headline and tabloid. He showed that Bob Crane had been trying to change. He had been trying to claw his way out of the destructive world that fame had dragged him into. In fact, just days before his death, he had taken steps to cut ties with John Carpenter. And the proof was chilling: a personal letter written by Bob himself shortly before he was killed. That letter haunted Robert more than any piece of evidence. To him, it was crystal clear. His father hadn't just been murdered, he had been betrayed. Robert spent decades chasing answers, piecing together fragments of a truth that never fully came. And still, the same cold reality remained. The justice system had let his father down. The case was unsolved, and the world had simply moved on. What hurt Robert the most wasn't only the mystery of who had done it, it was how easily the public had forgotten. The same audience that once adored Bob Crane turned their backs the moment things got messy. They remembered the scandal, not the years of laughter. They remembered the trial, not the talent. So Robert did what no courtroom could. He told the full story: ugly, unfiltered, but undeniably human. Bob Crane's story is often boiled down to cliches: a sitcom star with a dark secret, a shocking murder, a friend turned suspect. But the truth, as Robert revealed, was far more human and far more unsettling. His father's life wasn't a dramatic rise and fall. It was a slow unraveling, one tangled in loneliness, addiction, and the crushing weight of fame. For years, Bob Crane had been the center of every room, the star of Hogan's Heroes, a man who made people laugh effortlessly. But once the cameras stopped rolling, he was someone else entirely. Off stage, he was locked in a battle with addiction that blurred every line. The line between intimacy and exploitation, between friendship and manipulation. And by the time he tried to escape, it was already too late. What makes the tragedy sting even more is how history remembered him. For millions, Bob Crane isn't the brilliant radio DJ, the quick-witted improviser, or the Emmy-nominated actor. He's the man from the headlines, the scandal, the tapes, the unsolved crime. Years of creativity and laughter were buried under whispers of shame. Because the case was never solved, his life became a kind of spectacle, the kind people gossiped about, speculated over, and then quietly forgot. Even his professional legacy suffered. Hogan's Heroes, once one of the most beloved shows in America, became nearly impossible to mention without adding a grim footnote about Crane's death. Networks stopped reruns. Directors avoided his name. Hollywood itself seemed determined to bury him, not because they didn't care, but because looking at his story meant confronting something uncomfortable. Bob Crane's downfall forced the entertainment world to face a hard truth, that behind the applause, behind the lights, many performers were silently collapsing. Crane wasn't the only one battling demons. He was just the one whose story ended in violence. And even today, decades later, whenever true crime podcasts or TV specials bring his name back into the spotlight, the focus is always the same. Who killed Bob Crane? But that's not the only question we should be asking. The real question is, why was he so vulnerable to begin with? How could someone loved by millions feel so isolated? Why did no one step in when the warning signs were all around him? Why was his pain ignored until it was too late? The truth is, the Bob Crane mystery will probably never be solved in a courtroom. But in the quiet pages of his son's book, in the old case files of detectives who never gave up, and in the minds of fans who still wonder decades later, a different kind of truth emerges. A truth that exposes not just a killer, but a system that refused to see the danger until it was far too late. Because Bob Crane wasn't just the smiling face of a sitcom, he wasn't just Colonel Hogan, he was a man caught in a storm of expectation, trying to reconcile who the world wanted him to be with who he really was. On screen, he played the confident hero. Off screen, he was slipping into a darkness no one wanted to acknowledge. His sudden and brutal death shocked the nation, but it revealed something deeper, how little we really know about the people we admire. For decades, the unsolved murder overshadowed everything else. The focus stayed on the tapes, the scandal, the endless speculation, the charm, the wit, the talent, all drowned out. Even today, when his name comes up, curiosity wins over compassion. Bob Crane is remembered as a headline, a scandal, a cautionary tale. But his story is so much more. It's not just about what happened in that Scottsdale apartment. It's about the warning signs ignored, the struggles hidden, and the high cost of fame. The courts never delivered justice. But maybe justice lies in something else, in remembering him as more than a scandal, in remembering his laughter, his creativity, his humanity. His story demands we look past the headlines, past the easy labels, and ask harder questions about the people we idolize. Because Bob Crane's legacy is not just tragedy, it's a reminder that behind every smile on a screen, there's a story we'll never fully know.